Hey guys, welcome back to another amazing deck tech from Push the Point. I've got the man, the winner of Road to Nationals. I don't know which store it was in Road to Nationals.
With the spell scroll.
Spell Squall.
Spell scroll.
Spell
Yeah,
Scroll.
No.
All right, there you go. I thought it was some Greek thing. We've got Yorgos. It's the Push the Point fan favorite. How are you?
I'm pretty great. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. I have to say that RTN season's been fairly kind for us. So I've walked away from my weekend in a chipper mood, and more so for you because you won with none other than DROMAI, Ash Artist.
DROMAI. I mean,
I'm surprised. I'm not going to lie. I'm surprised. You're the Guardian man, right? You've done DROMAI of all things.
I'm the guy that just picks the hero that has 50% with everything, and I just go with that hero. I'm the numbers guy. That's apparently
a good way to be. Okay, so we have done some deck techs before with Jamie Faulkner that you can see on our channel. That he does an extremely good deep dive into how the fundamentals of DROMAI work. So I'm going to say that if you really want to dig into the real core fundamentals of DROMAI and how the dragons work, I would say check out this video. If you know what you're on, how DROMAI sort of works, should be the video for you. So we're just going to smooth over and assume you know the core fundamentals of DROMAI. Just otherwise we'll be here all day. So there we go. Well, let's go through the equipment here. So you went for the Crown of Dominion. So that is a pick. Sometimes there's a blocking pick with Crown of Providence, but the Crown of Dominion with the gold token. Why did you choose that?
I mean, there are some matchups where you might have preferred the armor, but in general, the tome is so powerful and, it glues the whole deck together that I cannot see any matchup where you don't want to have access to tome. I mean, the card, a big play pattern of DROMAI, and that's almost a core, mechanic of the hero, is that you want to save for a turn where you want to play the tome and, start pivoting the tempo. While blocking all the time, you want to pivot into being the guy that, presents the threats and wants to overwhelm the board and stuff. And tome just does that perfectly. I mean, it really solves a lot of things. And something that we might get into more detail later is that it allows you to play more silver bullet type of cards. I mean, you can add defense reactions to matchups where you might not want too many defense reactions, or sometimes, you can put some cards that are not always great into some matchups because you have the tome. Because, if you have a tome in Arsenal and you set it up and you have a card that's not good in the current situation, you can always just pitch it away, and it really smooths how the deck works.
Oh, there you go. All right, okay. So, Crown of Dominion, that is the reason why. Flame Scale Fairness, it's a pretty obvious one. It's kind of one of the most core things that you need because of the ability to get an instant make Ash, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a staple in DROMAI. I mean, how the lists work with DROMAI at the moment. I mean, if you play the heavy red DROMAI deck, and that's at the moment pretty much the only deck you want to play as DROMAI, you need the Furnace because it helps you cycle. Your deck is on almost a lot of red, so you do a lot of pitch red for a 1 cost, and then Furnace for a 2 cost, and all that core DROMAI stuff.
Yeah. You got two hand pieces here. You got the Silken Form, and you got the Wave of Reality. So clearly easy picks as to know why. I remember there was a time where the DROMAIs were using the Silken, not the Silken Form, the other ones that came from outside.
Yeah, the one that you can pay 1 and prevent 1 damage and opt 1 to make us at, turn 0.
Yeah, you didn't go for any of them, so why did you pick... What are these two doing?
Well, first of all, the main thing is that Silken Form is basically there as an arcane barrier. It's slightly better than an arcane barrier because effectively the first time you are dealt any type of arcane damage, you just pay for Quell, and afterwards you already have a Nass and you transform it into a Nass Wing, so you still have the arcane barrier 1, but you also get a free Aswing. So
Yeah.
it's in most, except versus Vincent, which is not a huge part of the metagame at the moment, it's a strictly better Arcane Barrier 1, and also has some minor upsides to some other matchups like Katsu or Dorinthia. So it's just free upside to run Silken form over Nuldun.
Yeah. Yeah. But what about the we were talking about the other cards,
The way
the instant ones that prevent the next one. So how come you didn't opt for those in the end?
I mean, I honestly think that Wave of Reality is you need Wave of Reality in some matchups, and Droma is one of those heroes where you need you are pretty high on the target list of a lot of decks and a lot of heroes, so you need the sideboard plan for a lot of heroes. So you don't have the luxury of having an extra piece of equipment to sometimes when you go second to be able to make an ass at turn one. I mean, that's a luxury that you don't have as DROMAI because your sideboard is so tight.
Okay, fair enough. So when is Wave of Reality coming in?
Pretty much versus in most matchups, it's most your default setup is Wave of Reality. You use Silken form into the Arcane decks and into Katsu and into Illusionist. That's pretty much the thing. The best thing about Wave of Reality is that protects you from Kodachis for a turn, and that's pretty huge
Yeah.
versus ninjas.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I'm not going to talk about the weapon. There's only one, which is make your dragons work. And you went for the Snapdragon Scalers, which is doesn't surprise me too much because of the um, just the occasional attack action card 0 for 4, and then you give it a go again, right?
Yeah, I mean, I when I started, I this list is pretty close to the list I used in Barcelona.
Yeah.
So that Snapdragon and Snats and all these zero cost attacks really smoothed out Dromai because it gives you an angle to attack decks that go heavy on poppers to kill your dragons or destroy your phantasm attacks. And it's great that you have a different angle of attacking, like having hit effects with cards that do not have phantasm, like Snats, like Dust Up, like all these cards. It's pretty great to have access to Snapdragon, and it's super relevant in the mirror because
Right.
doing the snats and kill the mirror guy and use Snapdragon and drawing a card and that's how you win the mirror match. That's how you get enough ahead to overwhelm the opponents. I mean, because Dromai has every single card almost in the deck is red, and in most matchups you have like 3 blues, 4 blues, at most 5. You know, every single card you draw is gas. You don't have misses. You don't have cards that you feel bad in putting in arsenal. So any card you draw is insane, and that's the reason why Snapdragon is so important because both with E-Strike and Snaps, it just gives you a free card.
Yeah.
But I want to note here that last week I made the change of adding also Mage Master boots to the deck, which is in the sideboard because it's
Got ya.
big down below. So, and the reason for that is because you need Mage Master boots into Brutes and mainly into Guardian. Because you don't have the luxury of having a lot of action points into Guardians specifically, so getting go again into once per game with the zero cost is not that relevant. While putting into play a passing Mirage and attacking with a dragon or versus a brute or versus a guardian might be enough to win you the game. It's super relevant, and you might get into the position where at the moment I'm running both of the packages. I'm
Yeah.
running both Beatmaster and Snapdragon Scalers.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll just say that the caveat of this as well that DROMAI is incredibly complex deck, and there is a lot of decision points, very fine decision points, and I think that mostly comes around to when you're playing up against popper heroes, basically, which is Guardian and Brute, right? That there is just a completely different mindset you need to take on with when you're playing into those heroes. That's fair, right?
That's exactly pretty much it. I mean, there is a completely different game plan when you're playing versus heroes like Fi or Katsu, or when you're playing versus, Kaio, the new brute, or Levias, or Guardians, and all these. It's a completely different approach you have to take.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Sounds like when you're going through all this, it really does make me think. God, she seems to be in such a bit of a rough spot because there's quite a lot of the popular heroes that a lot of people are taking. They're in a. It just doesn't seem like a great position, but you did it and you won it. So let's go through this. So the Billowing Mirages seem to make total sense. 1 for 3, go again. Good, great setup cards. Dust Up as well. 0 for 4 because, like you're saying with the snatches, if this hits, it's those sort of get over card right. Yeah, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go through the attacks. I'll let you explain a little bit more about the Billowing Mirage. Is there anything more to say on that I'm missing?
I mean, we started with Billowing Mirage being one copy, and I went into two copies, into three copies pretty fast, because I think I honestly feel like Billowing Mirage Red is a staple in DROMAI. I mean,
Yeah,
I cannot ever believe a deck without running three copies of this card, because it's so easy. It's the best use of the first resource to use after you've played the Tome, almost most of the time. I
mm-hmm.
mean, you present an attack, so you deal 3 damage. So even if you have a popper, if they have a popper, you still deal at least 3 damage and make an ass swing. It only costs 1, so you can set up the plays into Billowing Mirage, into Fernance, into CNC. It fits. It's not great, but it does everything above average, and you're pretty happy with cards like that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Dust Up.
That is also a pretty important card in the deck, because there are so many matchups where your play pattern is block with 3 cards and play a single card in your hand in your turn, or attack with a dragon, and Dust Up does that pretty great. So if you've blocked with a defense reaction and another card, and you kept a card for Arsenal, and your turn is Dust Up, and you deal attack for 4 and threatening a pretty annoying hit effect into most cases, which is make a Nash swing. And it's a play pattern, it's a turn cycle you're pretty happy about
Yeah,
when that happens.
I always called this card the Illuminate of Bolton.
Mm.
It's just wow, a 0 for 4 with an on hit effect that just ties into everything I want this deck to do. It doesn't have go again. It doesn't need go again. It's just so annoying. So
It's exactly that. It's probably one of the most annoying cards in the deck.
I know that for a fact. It's it's such a good finisher as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and so many times, I mean, sometimes you have too many action points, so Dust Up, is a 0 for 4, makes an ass swing, and, you know, piling up ass swings is pretty relevant in a lot of matchups, so having ways to make extra ass swings, that's always welcome,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
absolutely. So you've also what else in terms of the attacks here? You've got we'll go with Sweep and Blow. I think that's another. It's a clear staple. Only 2 copies though. How come?
Which one, you said?
Sweeping Blow.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Sweeping Blow, I think that's also pretty much a solid choice. I mean, Sweeping Blow, when you get it in the first few turns of the game, this card feels insane. I mean, it, gets you out of rough situations with us, and it, pushes your game plan. But in terms of impacting the game state, Sweeping Blow is a bit weak. I mean, paying 1 for a 3 go again, that makes an ass. There's nothing. You
Yeah,
don't
and
want too many copies. It's like your yellow 6 power cards in brutes. It's that type of slot where you need it. It's
but not too
required.
much of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
not too much of it. You're never happy if your turn has nothing else to do and your turn is sweeping blow. That's how you lose games. I mean, if your turn is sweeping blow pass.
Yeah, and if you're sitting on like quite a lot of ash anyway, the the effect is largely like uh, doesn't. Yeah, but early game, sure.
It's probably one of the best cards to see in the first 2 turns of the game,
Yeah,
by far.
so I can see why you went down for the 2 copies. That's fair. we'll go for the generic attack action cards. The 2 copies of Ravenous Rebel. All these cards just don't surprise me. And if you're a seasoned DROMAI fan, it probably wouldn't surprise you to see a lot of these cards either. But why did you only go for 2 copies of Ravenous Rebel?
I mean, I think there are more nowadays. There are more matchups where the play pattern of DROMAI is block with 3 cards, play a card,
Mm-hmm.
rather than it was a few months ago. So I don't want more 2 block cards in my deck because a lot of times that's how you lose games
Mm-hmm.
as DROMAI. When you are forced into that position where you want to block with 3 cards every turn, and you get a bunch of 2 blocks and sigils and tomes, and you just die because because your cards don't block. So I didn't want to put too many cards in my deck that do not block well.
No, that's fair enough. We've got 3 copies of E-Strike. That's a great card to put in. Makes total sense. It has a lot of flexibility to it. Is there any more to say?
I mean, 5 draw a card is probably the most played mode on this card because, as I said already, your deck is red. Anything you draw is probably going to be gas. And
Yeah.
you know, 5 draw a card, draw a sink below, put a sink below in arsenal. You did a 2 card 9 out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And then CNC. Oh, CNC. Yeah.
CNC is slightly better in DROMAI because, again, it's a hit effect on a card that doesn't have Phantasm, and which is pretty important. It's probably the best card to end your turn with, by far. I mean, it retroactively protects your dragons because a lot of times you attack once, you attack with a Kyloria without Phantasm, so they give you a card and an equipment to prevent the Kyloria, and then you Ravenous Rabble and they take some damage and are like, okay, I'm fine now, I will keep my 3 card hand to hit you back, and you go like, okay, Fernand's CNC, now you need to block again. You just keep a card, you kill my Kyloria, and they get a 5 card hand now.
Yeah, it's so threatening, isn't it? And it's like I like that you're making that point of you are protecting dragons at the same time. So no, extremely good card. I think that is from your main board all of your attacks. I know that you got quite a few stuff in the sideboard, but we'll skim over to that side when we get to the sideboard part. Right. Let's talk about some we'll get to the dragons later. Let's talk about burn 'em all. You've only got 1 copy. Let me just check. Have you got some in the
One
sideboard?
copy, only 1 copy.
Okay. Explain. I don't know why. Why have you only got 1 copy?
I mean, it's a card that a lot of times deals, the thing with Burn Them All is that the second copy is much weaker than the first one always. So if the first one deals 4 arcane damage, it already burned through most of your graveyard already. Yeah. So the second copy of Burn Them All most of the time is not dealing that much damage in the slower matchups. While the first copy, whenever you get it, if the game drags enough, it will definitely deal more than 3 or 4 damage. Because it's your only copy, there is nothing else you care about. You can just burn through your whole graveyard to keep it as long as possible because it's your only copy. So I prefer to increase the numbers in a card, in that card, to make it as powerful as possible and reduce the numbers, because if you get in a hand with 2 copies of Burn Them All and you have nothing to do, that's how you lose games as DROMAI.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have nothing to do in a turn where the opponent gives you some air to breathe and your hand is Burn Them All, Asvolai.
Yeah. Doesn't feel good.
Yeah, so you want to reduce this type of, my approach at least is that you want to reduce the number of these type of hands as much as possible.
That's fair enough. What else is there? I think I will. Yeah, to be honest, I think we have to talk about, unless you have explained about Tome a bit when we talked about the Crown of Dominion. Is there anything more that you wanted to sort of weigh in on Tome that we haven't explained?
Probably that's the most of it. That setting up a tome in Arsenal and getting out of bat, it does just so many things.
Yeah.
I mean, transforming in flesh and blood. It's pretty weird to think about it, but imagine being able to store a blue card in your arsenal.
And
I
play
mean,
it. Yeah,
yeah,
and use it for its.
and use it for it as a blue. Imagine being able to do that in Flesh and Blood. Sometimes, I mean, you get these insane hands, and you're like, oh no, I can't play these cards.
Yeah.
You can with Tome, and that's why it's such a powerful card. And it's a card that sometimes makes has the illusion effect. Illusions in general, snowball a lot,
Yeah.
and Tome really accelerates this whole process. I mean, that's pretty much self-explanatory. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That is fair. Let's talk about some. Let's go defensive now, right? Let's talk about some defensive cards, and then we'll end your main board with some of the. I call them the. I don't know the weird cards, or the. I don't know. We'll say the weird cards, but just more that maybe the support cards. That's the better term.
Okay.
All right. So
I,
so.
sorry,
Oh, go on.
I want to make sorry. I want to make a note here that the main deck we are seeing currently is the deck that I'm using against Guardians. That's why there are so many weird choices in the main deck. It's not main deck is not a thing in DROMAI because your deck completely changes, in each matchup. But and the main deck we're seeing at the moment, that's why we see all these cards. It's the deck versus Guardians.
Okay, so this is what you would. So what we're seeing in the main board right now is what you should. You kind of put this into a Guardian matchup. Is this also the same for a Brute matchup?
No, it's not exactly the same. No,
Okay, fair enough. But okay, defensive cards. We've got 3 Fateful Scenes, obviously. 3 Sink Belows, obviously. 2 Sand Covers as well. Seems pretty obvious. It's amazing against Wizards, right? As well.
it's pretty great into Wizards. I mean, if there was any other defense reaction, if there was any 0 for 4D react, I would probably play the other 0 for 4D react over Sand Cover. But I want more 0 for 4 block card that can get into Arsenal. I even tried Test of Strength in this deck, but even with 100% failure rate Test of Strength just for the 4 block, but it's a bit too clunky and it cannot get into Arsenal. So
Yeah.
some cover blocking for 4 is insane in DROMAI.
Yeah, 100%. 1 copy of Oasis Respite.
I mean, so it's good into Bravo specifically because sometimes you can prevent a crippling crash off the top of the deck, without having an arsenal.
Yeah.
And it's pretty relevant into Azalea because versus Azalea the games probably go a bit grindy, and being able again to block a dominated arrow off the top of the deck without having a card in arsenal is super relevant. It wins you games.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That is fair. I'll put Sigil. I think Sigil is a really cool trick card, but I don't know. Is that fair to say? It's not really a defensive card. It's also an offensive card in ways as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes, keeping having 4 ass wings versus matchups like, Kasai and blocking with 3 cards, keeping a sigil and attacking with 4 ass wings while gaining 3 life.
Yeah.
It's just silly, yeah.
Yeah, very powerful. Okay, I think that's the weird cards. Let's talk. Well, no, that's the defensive cards. Let's talk a little bit of these weird, like Guardian cards. Okay, so let's break this down into Guardians, right? So we've got the free passive Mirages and the Time Snap Potion. 2 copies of Remembrance. That seems to make a lot more sense to me because the pass. It's basically set up for Ghostly Touch. Is that the plan?
The main game plan into Guardians is to try and set up the dust for Chromais, the dust from the Chrome Caverns.
Yeah.
And create a board state where you're like having a bunch of Chromais and dust from the Chrome Caverns and overwhelm the opponent without having Phantasm and essentially, putting them into a situation where they need to take the damage out of the full board you have and they die. They can't do that. They do that once, and the second time you do that, they're dead.
Okay, right. That's fair. And then is the pass and mirages and the time snaps and the remembrances to what you and your remembrance in Mirage back in or
I mean,
Chrome?
Miragai and DROMAI are the hottest cards that you put back into the with the remembrance, but also you also have the trick with ghostly touch that you only bring into guardians
Yeah.
to do the time snap into passing into attack with ghostly touch, and you can do that twice with a remembrance because you do that once, they destroy the passing mirage, and then you play remembrance, you put back the time potion, back the time mirage, the passing mirage, you play another time snap potion, and next turn you go again time snap into passing into attack with ghostly touch twice.
Yeah.
And that should be I mean, there is a big part about this deck, and I think a reason why I managed to win the RTN was that I was super prepared to not lose to Victor or Bravo.
Right.
That's why I think it's a main focus of this deck, because even though traditionally the Guardian Illusion matchup is a matchup that it's in everyone's mind is an illusionist favorite, but the thing is that
Well, it depends who you ask.
yeah.
And you're a Guardian main, so to be fair, I do ask. If you think it's DROMAI favoured and you play a lot of Guardian, normally you'd be the person I'd go, surely you should say it's completely favoured for a Guardian, but you're saying it isn't.
I'm honestly I'm saying that it actually is. If the Guardian player kills Miragai and passes Mirage and completely ignores the rest of the board, completely ignores and just hits you at face every single turn
Oh,
with
okay.
the biggest number attack they have access to, and at some point, because you're blocking so much to maintain your life, at some point they will naturally set up a CNC panel. You just die. I mean, and at some point, if you spend too many resources blocking, they can even fatigue you then, because if you use your Mira guys and your Chromais to block,
Yeah.
you just die. So I wanted to have a critical mass of threats with this deck. So even if I lost some resources while defending, while getting hit by pummels, while getting hit by commanding conquerors, I would still have the gas as the DROMAI player to actually end the game and be able to kill the Guardian when we reach at the stage where I have overwhelmed the board. That's why we are running every single guard versus Guardian that's relevant. We are running 3 copies of Dust of the Chrome Caverns, Passing Mirage, Time Snap Potion, Ghostly Tats, 2 copies of Remembrance. I mean, we just don't want to lose. We want to make sure that we will not lose versus Guardian in this matchup.
Okay, so this is a heavily tuned deck to deal with that. All right, okay. I think I'm gonna I'm gonna skim over quite a lot of the dragon selections from Invoke, like because a lot of them just make a lot of sense, right? From Azrali to Yenderai, like you said, Chromai is an incredibly important card. Miragai is incredibly important. Kylori is extremely good. So what I want to do is talk about what's not being picked, right? So I know that you're picking Tomotai. It's probably the strongest legendary dragon out there because, you just flip 2 reds, destroy an extremely key piece of equipment. Hard to pull off, hard to set up.
I mean, Tom helps a lot into these situations, and
Yeah.
there are so many matchups where you randomly get Tomultai and the matchup is suddenly super in your favor. It's probably the best dragon it's the most threatening dragon in some matchups, and getting the boots from Kasai, getting the arcane barrier from Guardian, getting any relevant piece of equipment, it might give you games that you were not supposed to win.
So it's always worth putting it in.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a slot. It blocks 3. It's a red. I mean, it's really hard to miss from there.
Okay, that's fair. So the Uvia is, I don't know, I'm not a major Dromai man, but this seems like a card that sort of phases in and out of decks as they come. So is this something that you like? I suppose as we went through all the other ones, I feel genuinely you don't ever take those cards out in any matchup. Is that from the small dragons, right? Is that fair?
I don't think I take out any dragon, to be honest, in any matchup.
Okay, fair enough. That's easy enough to. So all these dragons are in every matchup, so that's
Yeah.
fair enough. So the Uvia though, it feels like it does weave in and out. So you went for the 2 copies of Uvia, and how come?
I think the way at least I pilot the deck, or I feel like the deck works, I think 2 VS is the staple because unless you have a very specific plan or a very specific list, you don't have the ass for more than 2 VS most of the time. I
Right.
mean, most of the time you run 2 VS to get one into play. You never want the second UVA into play unless the opponent actually commits a full attack to kill Uvia, which most of the time, most opponents don't do that.
No, no,
I mean,
it's quite
so
an awkward card to deal with because it has 6 health and the attack is like quite small. So you're like and actually it's just it's slowly draining your soul with all these tiny dragons.
you want to have access to the card, but you don't want too many copies. So, I could see going down to one, but I feel two is a bit more safer because in some matchups, like versus Guardian or versus Brutes, it's pretty relevant to get it early into the board.
Mm,
So you start, when you trade Ash Wings for Poppers, you always feel happy about that.
yeah, no, that's
You always feel great about that.
absolutely. And then of course Invoke Dominion. I mean, oh, evil card.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit more clunky because you only reveal a single card. Tomultai, it's pretty, I don't know the math behind it, but Tomultai pretty much never misses for at least one armor, equipment.
Yeah.
And most of the relevant equipment are one armor or less. So pretty much always goes through. Dominia, though, is probably one extra copy of a dragon that's really threatening for the opponent. When Dominia hits the board, the opponent must deal with it.
Yes, it is. It feel. Is it safe to say it's a little bit of a like an ALS for Prism, where you go, I put this on the board, I do what I do, I know what your turn is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty much that's what happens most of the time. The only bait with Dominia is that it's not worth because it costs 4 and 4 is
Mm.
expensive. The same goes with Tomultai. Most of the time, if your turn is not efficient to be able to play these dragons, and that probably means either having a tome or having a blue, you most of the time should never play them. I mean, pitching 4 cards to play Dominia is not a winning play. Like,
No.
there's no way it's a winning play to pitch all, your whole hand, skip your whole turn to make a Dominia attack. Dominia misses and you instantly lose the game.
Yeah, you got. It takes some setup.
Yeah.
It takes some setup to get that going. That's fair. And then obviously I can't remember the last big dragon. Optimus Prime or I don't
Yeah.
know. Okay, it's not
My
called that.
Dragon or something. Yeah. I mean,
You haven't put that in. It's not a card I see very often. Why is that?
there is a huge difference between 5 and 6 resources, even though that might sound silly. Because 5 resources means if you have a blue and 2 extra cards, that's doable. 6 resources means you need a blue and 3 extra cards, or you need 2 blues. There is no way you will have 2 blues with DROMAI.
No.
So
Yeah, it's just too hard.
it's too hard. And to be honest, even if it dealt 12 damage the moment it went into play, it doesn't even do that. You need to reveal, the opponent might pop it, there are so many variables that most of the time it's not even worth a slot.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. And then, of course, Rate the Embers. This is probably the most. I think it's actually the most powerful card in your deck, to be honest.
I mean, there are, because how this deck is built and you have enough ways of making Ash Wings, sometimes you need to cut this card, for instance, versus ninjas, because it only blocks for 2, and ninjas have an easy way of dealing with Ash Wings. But apart from ninjas, I think this card destroys so many matchups. I mean, warriors have a really hard time dealing with Ash Wings. Trading Ash Wings for poppers into brute, you feel super happy about that. I mean, Azalea has no way of attacking Upswings
I
at all. I mean,
I cannot talk about any time someone plays Rate the Embers, my soul drops because it's just like, oh god, it's just too much because making 3 Ashwings is just horrific in so many ways. It's your cheeky wink on. That's literally how it always works. So yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me. So that's pretty much this is the Guardian main board stuff. Okay, so let's talk about some of your side swap out cards, right? We'll sort of lean more of this into matchups. Okay, so you're up against brutes. What are you doing?
I don't need all the 3 copies. Probably, I'm not running Remembrance. I'm not running Time Snap Potion, obviously, and I'm probably bringing in the sensors and one more 3 block, to fit the curve. And sensor,
Yeah, let's talk
is,
about sensor.
I mean, that slot was Miraging Metamorph in Barcelona, and the reason for that was Miraging Metamorph can kill pretty much any dragon in the mirror match, even Uvias. And in the mirror match, you want the opponent to always have a clear board. You never want to give them a turn where they actually have a dragon in play. So Miraging Metamorph killing every single dragon was super relevant. Now that you are faced with way more decks that can do stuff to you, you prefer to have the sensor because first of all, it's not poppable. Censor, they cannot just give you a 6 power card and your turn. And the thing with censor is that at the moment exists some deck that have very specific ways of attacking you. For instance, Kasai runs 9 copies of Blade Runner. So whenever you attack with sensor into a Kasai, you know that if it goes through, Blade Runner is an auto pick, and it's pretty likely that they will have a Blade Runner because they run 9 copies of Blade Runner.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just reading the board, seeing what they got. Is there an agility token? Maybe not Blade Runner. Maybe I've got to pick up some other. Maybe Blade Flurry could be a one or whatever. You just look at the board, don't you, and go, "What's the one thing you would love to play?" You're not playing that, and if you don't have it, then fair enough. But if you did, you know.
And most of the time, this card is great because it has the Command and Conquer effect, where if the opponent has most of the time the opponents might have a specific hand, and they look at their hand and are like, if I call them out with Censor, they do not have a turn.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, I cannot take this risk. That's the obvious choice. I mean, with a more clear mind, you might not have made the decision, but while getting pressured with dragons and getting attacked with sensor, and are like, okay, if he calls Spoils of War, I lost. My turn is Saber, you play. So they go, okay, I need to block this. I need to actually commit equipment and the card to prevent that. And you retroactively again protect your dragons or protect your life total in order to get a big hand again and keep pushing the opponent.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So you'd be running this into the brutes, and you're saying that you'll swap out to some free blocks. Is there any sort of specific cards you had in mind?
I mean, you mean putting in or cutting?
So what are you cut? So you're cutting your remembrances. For brute, I tell you what we'll do. We'll just to sort of go to, because it's quite complex. If you've got a matchup, which you do, just follow the matchup sprite. Everyone, just you can see what Yorgos would put in there. So amnesia. Let's talk about that. That just screams Katsu.
I mean, Katsu, I think, is positioned pretty well in the current meta game, a bit better than Fi, to be honest. So I wanted the card to help a bit with that matchup. The Katsu matchup is not as horrible as it's with Fi. Fi is probably by far your hardest matchup as DROMAI.
Interesting. That's also up for debate. There's quite a few people over in the UK side that would say actually Katsu's worse as a DROMAI player. But hey, it doesn't matter. The ninjas, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Katsu is way more manageable because Katsu has way more specific hands they can do stuff with. And that's not the case with, I mean, sometimes versus Katsu, you can allow them to draw because at the stage where the combat chain is, there are no good cards to draw.
Yeah,
Because what are they going to do? Not everything has go again. Katsu has already triggered. Mask has already triggered. The worst case is what? Set up an arsenal for next turn. Who cares? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. No,
you
I
know,
hear you.
that's not the case with Five. Five, whenever if Five has an Art of War, you can never allow them to get an extra card because the extra card will be at least for damage. That's not the case with Katsu.
Yeah, that's fair. And you can tell Katsu has got respect because you've put amnesia in.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously does. I wanted an extra popper, and there were not really other good, variables for that. And amnesia is great because you need that extra bit of health versus ninjas in general, and specifically versus katsu. So I was expecting a lot of katsus, so I got an amnesia in.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Let's go through you got the Junebreaker Senpai. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but that's how I'm pronouncing it. 1 for 5, go again. If it breaks, she makes an ash token. What's this for?
I mean, mainly it's a great way when you pivot back into keeping a hand.
Yeah.
It's a great card to start dealing and pushing your advantage into this deck. It's pretty great into Warrior. That's one of the reasons why this card is in, because Warriors don't have too many poppers,
Mm,
so you're not super afraid. And running a 1 for 5 go again is a pretty great rate. I mean,
yeah.
you know, attack with a Dunebreaker Senpai. You also check if they have a popper or not, because if they allow the Dunebreaker Senpai to go through, your dragons are good to go. And after that, finishing with another attack that spends your action point as well is, that's it's great for the turn where you want to pivot the game and start being the aggressor in the
Yeah.
matchup.
No, 100%. Invoke Necria. That's pretty. We got one copy of that. When is this one dragon flowing in?
I mean, in it's pretty much always goes in whenever there is a deck that does not have too many 6 power cards,
Okay.
because having a huge dragon versus matchups like ninjas or warriors where you keep attacking them for 4, which is a pretty big number. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
attacking them for free, while if they try to clear the dragon, you also get a bunch of ass in the trade. I mean, it's good to have a big way to translate. If you have sometimes you have too many resources with DROMAI, because sometimes you play Tome with DROMAI and you have 4 0 cost cards. You have nothing to do with the extra resources. So Necria is probably one of the better payoffs in these types of matchups.
That's fair. That's fair. We've got 2 copies of Snatch. Pretty aggressive pick. Is that where is this coming in for the aggressive matchups?
I mean, yeah, whenever you have Snapdragon, pretty much the 2 Snapdragons and the Snapdragon Scalers and the Snatches are a package.
Yeah.
Whenever you put Snapdragon Scalers, you also put the Snatches in.
Yeah.
Whenever you cut Snapdragon for Mage Master, you also cut the Snatches. But I mean, even versus aggressive matchups, I mean, versus ninjas, at some point you grind down, the armor pieces of arms and boots, and keeping one card hand with a dragon on board and be like, okay, snuts.
Yeah.
They need to respect it. If they don't, you just Snapdragon Scalers draw a card, most likely will go to Arsenal, but you dealt 4 free damage, you drew a card, and you attacked with your dragons, and
Yeah, it's such a good enabler, isn't it? Just
Mm.
the ceiling that can come from that card is just crazy.
and it's probably one of the best cards to follow up a DROMAI attack.
Oh,
If
yeah.
the DROMAI goes through and you go like, okay, snuts, and they block, and then you go, okay, CNC.
It's just unfair. And
Yeah.
a pursuit of knowledge. I think, okay, explain yourself.
Okay, the reason the in this slot, like most of the other DROMAI list, have a blue Dunebreaker Senpai.
Right.
Not Windbreaker, the other one, the 2 for 6.
Oh, yeah. I know what you
Okay,
mean. Yeah, yeah. The
yeah,
the
okay.
the,
That,
the one that hits bigger. It doesn't
yeah, the
have
one that's
go again.
here without go again. Yeah, like most of the other drama on these two blues that you need to run in your deck, most of the time have that card because it blocks for 3,
Yeah.
and sometimes when you play to attack, 6 is a relevant number. The reason I chose Pursuit of Knowledge over that card is because if you go when I sit down to write down the matchups and see which cards I put it in, I added passing mirage into most matchups. So I wanted a blue card that's good into matchups where I'm not putting passing mirage in, and
Right.
that's mainly DROMAI.
Okay. Oh.
That's mainly DROMAI. So I needed to have, a card that can push me a bit forward into the DROMAI matchup. And sometimes Pursuit of Knowledge is great into ninjas as well, because you role play that offensive style that, if they do not have a big turn and you can take some damage, if you hit them back, they probably don't have a popper. Again, you attack with a Chromai, they do not block. You play a snatch, they block, and then you play Pursuit of Knowledge.
Hmm.
And you keep being the pseudo aggressive hero, and you force them into blocking. And forcing ninjas into blocking is how you win that matchup.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, we've kind of really cracked down on this and went through quite a lot of it. I know that it seems a little funky that we're going over quite a lot of stuff. There's a lot of context behind a lot of the dragons, but like I said, if you really want to break down the everything, I'd honestly just go check out the video I did with Jamie Faulkner. It's number 1 on our popular list. Go check it out there. He really does a great job on deep diving every single dragon's sort of like core strengths, and none of it's changed, to be honest. If I guess I'll ask this question really. So DROMAI overall as a meta pick, we're in this very large open-ended meta of quite a lot of heroes that are taking the wins each week. There seems to be a new one. And it appears, I think DROMAI is actually coming out on top of this week. What is DROMAI's strengths overall in this game of Flesh and Blood currently?
I honestly feel like Drome has a pretty high floor.
Yeah.
I mean, she's if you're playing an aggressive strategy and you're facing a Dromai and you miss a turn, you lost.
Yeah.
Most of the time it feels like that's the case. I mean, if you're playing as a Kasai and you are not able to keep pressuring and always having poppers and you miss a turn, you get overwhelmed. I mean, it sounds silly, it sounds a bit silly, and that's not how it works, but that's how it works a lot of times. If you play as Kaio and you are not able to pressure the Dromai constantly and do that and she overwhelms you, and then Droma is like, okay, I block with 3 cards every turn and keep a sigil, play the sigil, attack with 5 dragons. It's super hard to come back from situations like this. And honestly, it feels like Droma is there as a bit of a gatekeeper in the
Mm.
meta game. If you do not have a good plan, a good strategy into beating Dromai, she will be there to claim those wins. She will
Yeah.
be there to claim those games.
And what about on the flip side of it of what do you, what do you think her weaknesses are in this meta?
She has some. I mean, she has some a bit polarized matchups sometimes. I mean, if a Bravo runs hot into Dromai, you can he can sometimes almost get a free game, and the same goes with ninjas.
Mm.
If ninjas run a bit hot into Dromai and do these two big back-to-back heavy turns, and Dromai doesn't have her defensive tools or doesn't have the good cards that are great when you block with 3 cards and attack with 1, like Dust Up and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably her biggest weakness, that there is some variance behind your cards. You have 2 blocks and no blocks and 10 cards that block for 4.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I think also as well, I'd want to note to sort of say on this is that she's an incredibly complex hero to play. Like, I
I
I I,
mean,
I think when I say that, I think if you can go just there can be some games. I think if you're playing a bit, you know, of if you're being a bully into those heroes that just genuinely can't deal with her, it probably doesn't feel too complex. You just play cards on the board and you just go, you can't deal with it. But when you're playing against heroes that can deal with what you have to do, you have to think big, like like you have to play this bigger game of I've got to somehow I've got to get around you. And I think that's actually a very complex sort of dance to get right. And I think that's probably a lot of her, I think that's a lot of her as a downside in a
I,
major
I
tournament for an all day thing to do. If you're back to back Guardian in all day long, I mean that's kind of hard on the brain, right?
I think it's more that she needs a bit of a commitment. I think. I think you
Yeah.
cannot just pick up DROMAI 2 weeks before a major event and are like, okay, DROMAI is good at the meta. I'm going to play DROMAI in 2 weeks. It has a lot of weird decisions when you keep dragons and stuff, but it's one of those really, really rewarding heroes when you will lose a lot of games if you start playing Dromai, but at some point things will click and you will learn a lot from your mistakes, and at some point, it's a really rewarding experience playing the unfair game of having a board in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That is fair. Well, I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to break down another brilliant deck tech from yourself. Another deck that you've piloted to a win, especially even for an RTM. And I just want to leave this as your shout outs to your awesome Fab Chaos team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would ever be able to win this RTN without the help of the rest of the team, with the rest of the Fab Chaos players. So big shout out to them. Thank you guys. I hope we will manage. I hope we will do a big representation in Warsaw. So look out for us there.
I've seen the t-shirts there with your purple and blue colored t-shirts with Fab Chaos on the back. Be careful, everyone. These guys are on their way, and they've got the world champion in their team. So just be very careful. They'll probably start cleaning up in Poland. Can't wait to see you there. I'll leave some links below for their Yorgos's channel. He's done plenty of new videos. He's got a great Greek podcast that he's throwing out there. Got some deck techs on YouTube, and of course, you should 100% check out his stream on Twitch. It is brilliant. It's the most entertaining Flesh and Blood stream there is, in my opinion. So go check it out. Links are below. Thank you, Yorgos.
Thank you for having me.
Right. See you later.
See ya.